Wonderful. Recording in progress. Perfect. So hello everyone, and hello everyone who's watching it later on. I'll introduce myself and then hand over to Antonia. For those who don't know me, I'm Chloe. I'm a doula, a postnatal doula, and a movement teacher. And I'm a mum to Rosa, who's 6, and Lenny, who's 9 months, nearly 9 months old. And I'm on maternity leave at the moment, and I've asked a few different teachers over the course of my maternity leave to run classes for my audience, mostly kind of movement and postnatal related. And it's been really nice to collaborate with other people. And this is a bit of a different topic, but climate emergency is obviously something that kind of straddles loads of areas of interest and is relevant for all of us. So I'm so pleased that there's kind of a good take up of this topic, and so grateful to Antonia, who's doing this for us in her own time, giving it her energy for free. So we're really grateful for that. I think probably all of us here for similar reasons, and I think this session is kind of informal, so we can discuss all of our, I'm sure, many feelings, complex feelings about what's happening in the wider world. But I think probably, like me, you're feeling kind of, as a parent, there's a kind of dailiness about what we're doing. We're kind of trying to balance work and kids and trying to cook healthy meals for our children, and caught up in finding shoes in the morning before the school run and changing nappies and feeding babies, or whatever is relevant at your parenting stage. And then, of course, this kind of big looming thing that seems to be so important, but how do we kind of give time and energy to it when we're caught up in all the kind of minutiae of parenting stuff? How do we kind of manage our own emotions of kind of fear and anxiety and grief, and maybe even hope and exhilaration about a different future? And then how do we kind of manage our children's emotions, and how do we talk to them about what's going on? So I think coming together is a really useful starting point, because so often, if you're like me, you might feel quite sort of paralyzed by fear, paralyzed by a sense of powerlessness, like how, what can one person do in the face of all this? But I think there's a really exciting kind of new, I don't know if it's a new breed, but a new sort of narrative about climate activism, which is kind of hopeful without being unrealistic. And it seems like once we kind of get over this initial, like, oh my fucking God, this is horrible, there's something beyond that. And Antonia spoke to that in one of her amazing Instagram posts. Do follow Antonia on Instagram if you're on Instagram. So I'm sure we'll get to that. But I think, there's not just the despair, there's other feelings that we can explore, and I'm sure that together, you always feel better when you come together with people who are like-minded and feeling similar stuff. So yeah, thank you for being here, and I'll pass over to Antonia, and just say I might be in and out with my baby who's may wake up, so if I disappear, I'm not watching Bake Off, I'm feeding the baby.
Oh, Chloe, you're so gorgeous. It's so lovely to see you all. I've just realised Blossom Antenatal is my other job. So that's my name, Antonia, and it's such an honour to just that you've all come tonight. So lovely. And I'm really grateful. And if you'd happened to have told anyone today what you were doing tonight, they might have made a face, because it sounds really bloody depressing, doesn't it? But I've been doing these sessions for quite a while, and actually, interestingly, even though lots of people sort of turn up with this face, they actually leave feeling quite cheerful and uplifted, because as Chloe touched on, there are a lot of things that we can feel really enlightened about. And even if it was all really dark and really awful, just us together coming and to be with one another for an hour or so on a Tuesday night actually offers a huge layer of comfort on its own. But there's going to be more as well that will hopefully make you feel empowered and inspired, and rather more, I don't like to use the word hopeful, but positively anticipating the future that is in front of us. So I'm just going to share my screen so that you can all, is that okay with everyone? Is that working? Hang on, I'll open the PowerPoint, because what I normally do is I have a PowerPoint, because I've been teaching antenatal classes now online for well, ever since the beginning of the pandemic. There we are. And hopefully you can see on my messy screen that. Can you see living well amidst climate breakdown? Lovely. And so it is a PowerPoint. And it's got lots of writing on, but this is going to be very informal and relaxed. And look at us, we're a lovely size. If you want to just join in or say something, please do. I can only see a few screens on the side at any one time, but please use the chat box if you'd like to, or just call out, because there's obviously lots to say. I'm aware that you're mummies and you're tired, you've already worked a full day, and at least we don't have to trek off home after this. And at least we want to know where the loos are. But I want to, be as concise as I can, so that you have some evening left, because it's intense and there's a lot that you need to sort of sit with and process before sleep. So I'll go on through. So do interrupt me if you'd like to. And there will be times when I'll just stop and ask you to add your viewpoints and put things in the chat box and make comments, because all of you tonight have come here with so much knowledge and wisdom already inside of yourselves, and we want to all benefit from all that as well. So this is the sort of fancy title. We are going to be living well amidst climate breakdown. Let's start for me to go on. But essentially, this is a support session. It's for people like you who are worried. That isn't a spelling mistake. We are worried, and that's why we're here. Tiny little bit about me. I'm also a doula. I was a primary school teacher in hundreds of years ago in my other life, and then I became a antenatal teacher, and I still do that and love that, but I'm also a doula and I suppose a professional hand holder. That's what I called myself the other day, because I've sort of fallen into this role, having dealt with a lot of climate grief myself, of sort of scooping up other people who are where I was a few years ago, and it's working. So that's for some reason what I am doing with my life at the moment. And as I said, this session is designed to soothe you and to calm you, hopefully as well, and encourage and then energize you, because although the climate crisis is the biggest problem humanity faces, and our concerns are massively valid, then we do need to be able to function if we're going to be able to get on with our everyday lives and look after our families and ourselves, but also to do anything about it. No good if we're a puddle on the floor. So one of the first things we can do is to talk about it. Quickly in brief, my story, as I said, I was a primary school teacher, and then I became an antenatal teacher and doula, and I've got 3 children who, I mean, even though they've literally just been born, somehow they're 12 and 10 and 7. It's absolutely outrageous. And I know there's nothing more annoying than an old lady saying, "Go so fast," but it really does. I mean, I don't understand it. And so my children have been sort of waving placards around since they were tiny, against Donald Trump, and then against the refugee crisis, and fighting for refugee rights, and then animal rights, and now the climate crisis. So we're quite a shouty, protesty family, and that's fine. That's pre-COVID. That's not everyone's bag. That's just one way of dealing with this. That's one of the ways we cope, and one of the ways we take action. This is not to say that by the end of this session everyone has to go and get their felt tip pens out and make banners. But that's just a little bit about how I came into this. And actually, a few years ago, it was really hard, because I realised the extent of the problems we're facing, and it's almost impossible to get your head around the enormity of this crisis. And it's something that our species, although apocalypses have been happening around the world since time began, the thought that our species is sort of facing extinction, and that we're taking down so many other species along with us, is literally too much often for the human mind to comprehend or bear. And I fell into quite a dark place, and actually had to have some professional help, which did really help. I was very fortunate to be able to access that, and it really did help me. And then I've met so many amazing people along the way, through activism and groups, and now I'm working with Parents for Future, and that's just been so enormously helpful, that I'm now in a place where I can smile genuinely and help other people who may be feeling as I was then. So that's my main motivation. So that's me. This summer was a bit of a shitty shocker, wasn't it? We all saw it, I mean, in disbelief, and it even managed to dominate the headlines, even in the Daily Mail in August. So California, Turkey, Greece, Netherlands. I'm currently based in the Netherlands. We're moving back to the UK next year, but this country was flooded. It was mad. China underwater, Germany, and still it's sort of fallen out of the headlines again, hasn't it? And we're talking about the outrageous naughty people on the M25 causing a fuss. So it's highs and lows, and this summer was really, really hard. One of the things that sort of in the last couple of years has really struck me was that breathtaking racial injustice of climate breakdown, because there's an amazing article called Climate Anxiety is an overwhelmingly white phenomenon, written by a woman called Sarah Jackett Ray, who says that climate change and its effects, pandemics, pollution, natural disasters, are not universally or uniformly felt. The people and communities suffering most are disproportionately Black, Indigenous, and people of colour. So, you know, here I am, frustrated, worried, frightened for the future. But as a white person who's living a fairly comfortable life, I experience climate anxiety, whereas there are many, many people around the world experiencing climate breakdown, and they can't sit around on Instagram posting about it or taking themselves off on marches, or running campaigns to reduce the bloody plastic in Waitrose, because they're just trying to survive it. So that injustice is another massive motivator. We all hate injustice, and there's just so many parts to this, isn't there? So before we go any further, I would love you, if it's okay, just to either say or perhaps put how you're feeling about the future right now into the chat box, because what I often find in these sessions is when people do that, they will then witness pop, 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 pop in the chat box, people saying all the things that are in their minds as well. So go for it now. Totally overwhelmed and freaked out, says Vanessa. Yeah. Terrified and panicked, absolutely. So much fear, isn't there? Yeah. Yeah. Can you see the chat? Can you see that absolutely all of us are feeling the same way? And in some ways, that's really comforting, isn't it? That people are all sort of thinking the same things. So lots of fear, at a loss as to how to make a difference. Absolutely, that's valid. Can't stop thinking about whether my kids will have kids. I obsess about that too, Vanessa. Skeptical that humanity will take the opportunity to find a better way. I do not blame you. Not sure what to do. So many conflicting feelings. Brilliant. Thank you. I mean, not brilliant, awful, but I feel really comforted that it's not just me. I don't know about you. Because if you go out onto the average, high street or office nowadays, it's not as if everybody's talking about it, is it? So you can often feel like you're going a bit mad, but you're all, if you can see that, you're all feeling the same way. It's loss. We're experiencing loss. Few of you've used the word grief. It's grief, and pure and simple. And grief isn't anything to be frightened of. Grief is a very, very healthy reaction to loss. It equates to the amount of love you feel for someone or something. I run sessions for motherless mothers, for women who've lost their mothers, and I often explain to them, if you the love you felt for your mother is now equated in the grief you feel for her. And so it's nothing to be frightened of. It's just an explosion of love. It's just grief and love are sisters, two sides of one coin. So your grief is entirely healthy and valid. I'll take you on to a quote from Britt Ray, young woman. She just had her first child, she runs a newsletter. If you haven't heard of it, it's called Generation Dread, which sounds awful, doesn't it? But it's excellent. And she says climate and eco-anxiety are completely rational to feel. You do not need to embellish any of the science to feel your chest tighten. The body's stress response to our unfolding emergency is simply the body doing its job. So if you're anxious and you're frightened and you're worried and you're feeling grief, then you are extremely healthy. In fact, if you're not those things, then we would worry. The house is literally on fire, and you're not sort of blithely walking past it hoping it will all be all right and assuming someone else will sort it out. You're reacting physically in your body and your mind and your heart, and that's really normal and really valid. For many years I felt very alone and I felt like the crazy one who was always banging on about the weather and how we shouldn't have heat waves in February, and I was, you know, sort of shitting on everyone's fun. And I felt very alone in my several friendship groups, actually. So that sense of isolation, I'm sure some of you have experienced. But if you look at the chat, you can see that everyone's sort of feeling the same thing. And the good news is that now this year, after this summer, a lot more people are realizing just how serious this is. And so you're not going to be hopefully feeling as isolated, nearly as isolated as I did. Now, a lot of us are parents. Nod if you're a parent. Okay, so when I first started doing these sessions, I was doing them as an antenatal teacher, so for pregnant people, and they would all appear on the screen, you know, big and terrified, poor loves. And all of them would write in the chat box, "I feel so bad because I'm having a baby." And they would all say that, all of them, ashamed. I mean, how sad, awful, guilty that they were adding to the population. I brought my child into some sort of, you know, complete dystopia? What was I thinking? A little bit about that. Population growth really is not the problem here. It never has been. Now there's loads of us. I mean, 42 years ago when I was born, there were 4.5 billion people. So that's a hell of a massive increase, isn't it, in my lifetime? However, even though there's a lot of us, that is really not the issue. I don't know if you know this, but if absolutely every single human being that is alive today were to stand together in a room, or just stand, you know, a few meters apart, all of us, a few meters apart, then every single one of us would fit inside of Texas. Can you believe that? We're actually quite little. There's actually way more ants than there are of us. There's way more cows, pigs, and sheep, crying out loud, than there are of us. There's not too many of us. The earth is enormous. It's just that we are being really daft with the resources that we take and the resources we use. We have plenty of room. We have plenty of food. Every day we make enough food to feed 10 billion. And then we waste a third of it, which means, you know, millions go hungry every day. It's absolutely bonkers. So it's really not about how many of us there are. It's really about the way we live. And you might be thinking, well, yeah, but how can we change the greed and consumerism? And you're right, if we think of it like that, it's an impossible task. And so I want to take that away from you. I want to take that responsibility away from you, one person. And I want you to wipe out of your head any sense that having your children was a mistake. Any guilt, any shame, any blame, gone. Because you know whose babies we need? Your babies. Right? You are people that are missing Bake Off to sit and listen to a random lady talk about climate change. So you're the type of people that are going to be raising your babies in a certain way, right? You're going to be saying, oh, we don't waste food, do we? And now your children will know about methane from age 2, and they will understand that being kind to our neighbours and trying really hard to grow our own food and not buying things we don't need, that will come as standard to your children. So we absolutely need your babies, right? Not because it's their job to sort anything out, but because we need to change the way generations are living, and we change attitudes from birth. Your job is perhaps one of the most important jobs that there is now as parents. So I want all of that gone, all of that worry, and hopefully in terms of the worry we feel for our children's future in terms of practically food, water, war, so on, we'll move on to that later on, so that I can ease your minds with that too. The world has always had enough for everyone's need. We are mammals and we procreate. That's just what we do, and we match the food system. So if there's enough food, we'll keep having babies, and if there's less food, generations shrink. So it's not that we've invented and grown and spread, and the problem isn't the amount of people, it's absolutely the way we're living. So when you hear people say, wow, it's just too many of us, it's population growth, you want to come up with a really quick and easy to explain defense to say it really isn't the case, you know. And the people with the larger families in the global south are the people that have done absolutely nothing to cause this. So it's really quite offensive when people say that population is an issue, because that's really not the case. I'm just popping into the chat just in case I've missed something here. Yeah, it's always white men who say that, Becky. It's so annoying, isn't it? One reason I take issue with David Attenborough, says Natasha, he's continued to, and fed that too many people troop, and it gets used as another weapon against the global south. I completely agree. And he did it again in the latest film, didn't he? He did drop in about educating with families in Japan got smaller. But again, there was that patronizing narrative, and I felt exactly the same way. David Attenborough's done lots and lots of good, but that is really dangerous, isn't it? And so we need to, it's one of our jobs, one of our many jobs, is to sort of jump on that and correct people. Now, you may have heard of Birthstrike, a group of people who have decided not to have children because of the climate crisis, and my heart breaks for them. They're often, on This Morning or Breakfast News, because they are women who really want to be mothers but have chosen not to be because they say they've taken back their population issues. They're saying that they don't want to have children that may have to live through apocalyptic futures. And I admire their bravery and sacrifice. But on the other hand, if you're saying the world is not suitable and will never be suitable for a child, you've given up. That's actual despair. And I don't personally believe that we are allowed to despair when there are people dying right now. I mean, if we're despairing, we're saying, well, there's nothing we can do, so we won't try anymore. And I don't think we're allowed to say that, because we're fairly comfortable, and that's not the case. And if we go around saying it's too late, then that's what it will be, because we'll manifest that. It'll become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So whilst my heart goes out to these people, we are mammals. We eat and we poo and we have babies. That's what we do. I know we're fancy. We can go to the moon. We can, invent iPhones, but we're not that fancy. We're mammals, and mammals have babies. And Joanna Macy, who is a beautiful writer who's written extensively about this, I'm sure some of you've heard of her. She's in her 90s now, but she wrote Active Hope, how to get out of cope with the mess that we're in without going crazy. And she said, even if the world ends, there will be babies on the last day, because that's what humans do. So I personally feel that saying the world is not, we can't dare bring babies into the world because it's too awful, is defeatist, and we're not allowed to be defeatist. There's, as I've said, apocalypses have been going on for millennia, and there've always been babies. There's actually a headline, there was a headline in the spring which said long slide looms for world populations with sweeping ramifications. So a lot of science is predicting that actually, as time goes on, our population will sort of peak and then go right down, and numerous reasons. Our environment's so toxic now. Fertility is going to become is going to decrease. We're not going to be just getting knocked up left, right, and centre because of the toxics around us. And people are putting off having children. They're having children later. They're having children having careers first, and there are lots of parts of the world right now where adult nappies outsell baby nappies. So schools have closed down, and whole swathes of residential areas aren't occupied because families aren't renewing themselves. So actually this whole population thing is really daft, and we need to prove that we are still fighting for this world by continuing to live on it, and that means having babies. We need people to have babies and raise them to love the world, which children are better at anyone than loving the world. I don't know if obviously Chloe's got a sweet baby boy. I'm sure some of you have tiny children as well. And one of the things I'm most passionate about in my work is the fourth trimester, which I'm sure you all know about already. The first 12 weeks in an infant's life are absolutely critical to that child's, the rest of that child's life, because that's when the brain, which is, if you imagine some sort of wet cement, the child's born with a brain inside their skull, but it's not yet set. But after the first 12 weeks, it becomes really quite hardened by early experience. And then by the age 3, that brain is formed. Rapid growth is extraordinary, and a child's early experiences will literally dictate levels of empathy, levels of compassion, social skills. Sounds really bonkers to think that the way you treat your 4-month-old will affect, whether he or she has got good chat at a party in their 20s, but it does, because it's literally the foundations of the brain, the social brain. So one of the most important things I ask new parents to do is sit on their bums on the sofa and snuggle their babies and stay in their pajamas and feed that baby and pick that baby up and wear that baby and just be very physically close, because an infant needs physical touch as much as that infant needs food. It's as important to their development. And so, you know, a lot of mums are saying, I don't know what to do. I've got a baby and I can't go on a protest and I'm so tired. And I say, that's okay, because your one job right now is just to cuddle him. And they say, what? I say, let's say it, that's your job. That's your whole to-do list. Because every single day of those first 12 weeks is so fundamentally, hugely important for the future of that child and therefore the human race. If you are sitting on the sofa cuddling a baby, you are literally contributing to world peace. And there's a beautiful book called Parenting for a Gentle World by Robin Grill. And he says, in the last 10 years or so, we've actually been able to prove that if a child is met with love and empathy in the first 12 weeks of life, they will not grow to choose a violent or selfish life. That we can literally prove that now. So the way we look after our tiny infants is our contribution, sometimes our most powerful contribution to the climate crisis. So I really want you to be really rest assured that your work is vital. It is absolutely vital as parents, especially of tiny babies. Now, why is no one else talking about it? Has anyone experienced that? You bring up climate change and it goes down like a shit sandwich, or you drop it into a WhatsApp chat and then you just see the tumbleweed, or you're standing at the school gates and you say, it's a bit weird, isn't it? It's so hot. And everyone looks at their shoes. Well, that's me anyway. I'm sure you've experienced it too. Well, the psychology behind it is really interesting. Most people, unless they've really ingested the severity of this crisis, they just don't want to be, they just can't risk, as I said, we're mammals, they cannot risk being rejected by the pack. They have to conform because it's too scary to be saying controversial things. There's a really interesting experiment. They put a group of people in I'm going to just talk about this and I'm going to the chat. A group of people in a semicircle in a hotel room. And they said, oh, you're a bit early to fill in the survey. So if you just like to sit here on your own and just fill in the form about yourself and we'll be back. So each person was sitting on their own in a horseshoe of chairs. And after about 2 minutes, smoke started pouring in through the door. And they're being filmed secretly and they're looking at the smoke going, oh, that smoke, that doesn't look good. Then a fire alarm goes off. And when the people were on their own, they thought, crikey, a fire. They jump up, leave their things and leave the room. But when they were in a room when they filmed people in a room with 8 or so actors who were all told to ignore the smoke and ignore the fire alarm, and everybody looked around at everyone else. She's not doing anything. She's not reacting to the smoke. I guess it's nothing then. And they went back to filling in the forms. Every single person out of about 50 or 60 people sat there through the smoke. Firefighters said if it had been a real fire, they'd be dead. But the power of other people not reacting was so enormous that they didn't do anything. So if you're the only one at the school gate talking about climate change, you're the only one at the dinner party bringing it up, you quickly rein it in because it's a taboo subject. It's absolutely not accepted. And that can leave you feeling very, very lonely. There's a huge diffusion of responsibility. Well, surely I don't have to do anything because, it's not my fault. And if it was serious, other people would be talking about it, right? And they're not. So it can't be that bad. I must be over worrying because if it was really serious, people will be panicking and they're not. So it's obviously fine. But of course, if everyone does that, we're all sort of sleepwalking, as it says. And the denial and distraction has never been more powerful. I mean, there's so much to keep us occupied, isn't there? And the other thing is, our brains are very, very reptilian in many ways, and we are designed to respond to immediate threats. Saber-toothed tiger, shit! It might eat me. I better run out of the cave. But we're not designed to prepare for very long, far away, distant threats. A friend once said, I know you're so worried, love, but I just can't get worried about it because like everything's fine. Look outside. And I knew what she meant. Everything does look fine in the leafy street we lived on in London then. And she said, it just seems so far away. And she had 2 jobs and 2 kids, and she was the breadwinner and she was always knackered. And of course she felt that way. It was very low down on her list of priorities. It's just too much for our brains. And that's why lots of our friends aren't talking about it. Okay, I'm just going to read out these chats because you're making such good points. Annie said, I strongly consider not having kids due to climate and my guilt about bringing a daughter into doom world for her sake, not adding, yeah, you're not worried about the population, but you're worried about for her, absolutely. And that's valid. I'm worried about my kids too, desperately, Annie. I completely understand. Becky does too. I understand that, Annie. I feel worried now, but I also know that having kids is my main motivation for creating change. Nothing like a mother's rage to protect their kids. Absolutely true. That's a beautiful way to frame it. We're doing enough. You should hear me on the parents committee at school. They think I'm really annoying. I don't, Becky. I think you're brilliant. People don't talk about it because it's too huge, too big, too scary. Exactly. And it's very easy to switch off, isn't it? Oh, that's too much. I'm going to watch Love Island. Oh, Natasha says, surrounded by people who talk about it all the time, working at Natural History Museum. Ah, well, that must be nice. But talk and no action, that's not nice. Yeah, that's really, really crazy. I seem to be surrounded by people who accept there's a threat, but seem to feel like someone's going to sort it out right at last moment. Classic, because ultimately we want to be parented, don't we? Where are the grown-ups? Where are the parents? Where are the grown-ups? Because we can't really believe that we are actually the grown-ups. Sometimes I'll say, you're a mummy now to mums in the labour ward, and they're like, what? How is that possible? And technology, yes, something, we'll invent something. And of course, that's our life experience. We've always invented our way out of things, haven't we? We've never experienced this before. And Natasha, yes, the system is so corrupt, no matter what they do, capitalism will win and destroy the environment. We try so hard as one small family, Sophie says, to do our absolute best, not to waste, to shop consciously, and just one visit to a family member's house or to a play date and watching them somehow undo your hard work. I feel that deeply. It's very painful. And then when you think they're in the majority, it's like being kicked in the tits, isn't it? I feel that. I feel that too. That's brutal. Brutal. Right, let's make you feel better. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in, says Leonard Cohen. Now, there's an amazing podcast called Facing It by Dr. Jennifer Atkinson. And I've just pulled these quotes up because they're so good. We are grieving. It's called anticipatory grief because we're not actually experiencing it. It's a real grief. It's a real thing. We're experiencing anticipatory grief, and grief isn't something to be fixed because it's not dysfunctional. It's a healthy and necessary process we have to undergo in order to heal. A lot of us want to avoid it. I don't like feeling that, Love Island, but actually we have to feel it. In fact, grief can be a valuable source of wisdom as we move into an uncertain climate future. Grief is one of the great unacknowledged paths to hope and compassion. Yes, favourite phrase, along with hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. I love that. I'm going to write that on the fridge tomorrow, Becky. Having to constantly explain to extended family that you don't want gifts or plastic, and you think, oh, why don't they get it? I think it's not that they don't understand it, Natasha. I think it's an insult on them. You know, you're indirectly criticizing their way of life, and it's painful, so they lash out by buying extra plastic. I've experienced that myself. And yeah, very consumerist, very, very, very consumerist, but the tide is changing. Hope actually is very dangerous. It's a very dangerous thing. As Greta said, once we start to act though, hope is everywhere. So instead of looking for hope, look for action, and only then hope will come. And this is a really interesting way of looking at it. There's a really interesting essay by someone called Derek Jensen, who wrote in 2006, frankly, I don't have much hope. But I think that's a good thing. Hope is what keeps us chained to the system, the conglomerate of people and ideas that's causing the destruction of the earth. Hope serves the needs of those in power, as surely as a belief in a distant heaven. Hope is really nothing more than a secular way of keeping us in line. Hope is a longing for a future condition over which you have no agency. It essentially means you're powerless. So I like Becky's idea of the sleeves rolled up, because otherwise it doesn't really mean much. And then he ends with, losing hope, though, doesn't mean that we all lie down and give up. Lots of research to show that if a woman's in an abusive relationship, she stays. She stays and she stays and she stays until she loses hope that it will ever get better. And only then does she leave and protect herself. This is a real photograph from a camp in Warsaw in the Second World War, where Jews were aware that they were going to be killed. And so they completely gave up hope that they would have the future they were hoping for, that they'd escape. And they decided that, you know, just to make the most of the days or hours they had left. And so they had like a party, and they held hands, and they sang. And there was such joy in that moment, because they'd given up hope, and they experienced such joy and laughter that the Nazis just couldn't go through with killing them that day. And they actually survived because of that. And then the third example is Flight United 93, back in on September the 11th, where these passengers absolutely knew that there was no hope. They weren't going to be able to, you know, win over these hijackers. And only then, when they'd given up hope, did they dive into action very quickly and nearly succeeded. Sadly, they didn't, but nearly succeeded in overpowering them. And the power they had in their collective action once they'd given up hope was really fascinating. And tragically, it ended as it did, but the lesson is still there. And a lot of you have said, you know, we just imagine that other people imagining that someone's coming to save us, and they're not. And that's desperately painful for a lot of people to wake up to, and it actually will take them a while to get where you are. So what we have to do is find real patience for those people. The cheerful thing is we actually only need 3.5% of the population dramatically on board before it actually snowballs, okay? Before everybody starts jumping on board, because that's just how it's been proven mathematically. So we don't actually need to convince absolutely everyone on our street, in our school, in our families. I mean, we'd literally die of exhaustion. I know I would, if I carried on battling that one. We don't need to. What we aim for is the lowest hanging fruit. Those people who do want to talk to you, those people who hang back and say, actually, I was thinking about what you said and I worry about that too. Those are people that need your energy now, because they're going to be allies. Rather than those plastic warriors who really are firmly with their heads in the sand. It's too much for you to worry about trying to convince them. No one is coming to save us. We're going to save ourselves. And it's already happening. This is from Emma Maris of the National Geographic. We already have the knowledge and the technology we need to feed a larger population, to provide energy for all, to begin to reverse climate change, and to prevent most extinctions. The public desire for action is bursting forth on the streets. Last September, some 6 million people worldwide went on climate strike. It's happening again this weekend. Just as in 1970, the electric crackle of cultural change is once again in the air. I believe we will build a good 2070. That's one person's opinion. Nobody really knows. Nobody really knows. We have to be more comfortable with uncertainty. But everything in that quote is true. And I'm going to read this to you now, so sit back and relax. Sorry, I'm wittering on, but it's a very, very helpful and beautiful piece of writing for those of us who are wavering and not sure we'll be able to do this. It comes from an essay called Do Not Lose Heart, We Were Made for These Times. And it's written by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who wrote an amazing book called Women Who Run with the Wolves. And she says, for years, we've been learning, practicing, been in training for, and just waiting to meet on this exact plane of engagement. I grew up on the Great Lakes and recognized a seaworthy vessel when I see one. Regarding awakened souls, there have never been more able vessels in the water than there are right now across the world. And they are fully provisioned and able to signal one another as never before in the history of humankind. I would like to take your hands for a moment and assure you that you are built well for these times. Despite your stints of doubt, your frustrations, and of writing all that needs to change right now, or even feeling you've lost the map entirely, you are not without resource and you are not alone. Look out over the prow. There are millions of boats of righteous souls on the waters with you. In your deepest bones, you've always known this is so. In any dark time, there is a tendency to veer towards fainting over how much is wrong or unmended in the world. Do not focus on that. Do not make yourself ill with overwhelm. There's a tendency too to fall into being weakened by dwelling on what is outside your reach, by what cannot yet be. Do not focus there. That is spending the wind without raising the sails. Ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul, to assist some portion of this poor, suffering world, will help immensely. It is not given to us to know which acts or by whom will cause the critical mass to tip forward into an enduring good. What is needed for dramatic change is an accumulation of acts, adding to, adding more, continuing. We know that it does not take everyone on earth to bring justice and peace, but only a small determined group who will not give up during the first, second, or 100th gale. When a great ship is in harbour and moored, it is safe, there can be no doubt, but that is not what great ships are built for. I hope you take as much comfort from that as I do. I used to think I had to fix climate change all by myself before dinner time. That was my job. And I think part of it, my mum died when I was very small, and I think a part of me wants to fix climate change because if I couldn't fix her, but if I can fix climate change, maybe she won't be dead. So it's obviously really rational. But the other thing is, that's the individualistic culture we live in. Do it on your own, stay in your box, and you do everything on your own. But of course, that's utter bollocks. We're not designed to do things on our own. We're taught that from birth, but we're not. We're collective. We're pack animals, and most of the time, that's a really good thing. We're a jigsaw. We're a patchwork, and we all make our own contributions and add to them. So when you're at that party and everyone is sort of destroyed all the efforts you so energetically put into living the way you do, and then the people around you are not doing that. Let that shake off you. Your patchwork that you are adding to the quilt is vital, and the ripple effect is a thing. When they refuse, to they ignore your pleas for no plastic, and they give more when you specifically ask not to. That's the first stage in them getting to where you are. They need to fight it first and be angry and over purchase, and then they'll take the next step, and then they'll realize that you were right. So actually, don't fight that one. They're on a journey, and their resistance is actually a good thing, because it means they're in stage one. I don't want anyone to feel guilty. I mean, that didn't come up so much, luckily, in the chat. Sometimes people say, I feel so guilty, I feel so guilty. We have to abandon that. No one has done anything wrong here. Nobody wakes up in the morning hoping that there'll be, their car will be extra petrol-y, or that the hummus will be packed in plastic, or that, the planes there'll be more planes in the air. None of us have designed this system that we live in. And the truth is, and the really horrible truth is, that this has been a problem that's been deliberately hidden from us over the last 40 years by a very small group of people. There's some baddies out there, and they're not us. And this tweet, I think, is really important. She says the climate crisis is the result of a very small group of people destroying the planet to get extraordinarily rich. It's not humanity's failing. It's not human nature. It's something that can be stopped if the majority join together and hold that small group to account. And I don't know about you, but I feel that's what's starting to happen, because we're waking up to this. This is not our fault. You're all young. This all started a couple of 100 years ago. How far back shall we go since we invented the wheel? We've always been chasing progress, and a lot of it seemed like a good idea at the time, and then the Industrial Revolution and everything else. And with that, we've been given sanitation and medicines, and we've lived longer, healthier lives now. But it's all come at a cost. That's not our fault. We live in a baked system. It's like baked like a cake. And it's quite hard to unbake a cake, isn't it? That's what we're doing, because we're amazing. But I don't want anyone to sort of think about their own individual actions and feel bad. I mean, you're the type of people that come to a session like this, so you're all trying your best, and that's all you can do. Now, these people, they love it when we feel guilty. Coca-Cola love us feeling terrible for not recycling the bottle, which frankly they shouldn't have sold in the cinema anyway. Should have been in a can. So don't take the responsibility and guilt that should be theirs and not yours. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, it's all well and good, but what the hell do we do then? The best thing an individual can do is to not be an individual. Okay? In this. That's the best thing an individual can do. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't do all the things we're doing, that I'm sure you're all doing. We should definitely do that. That's step one. And our behaviour change does have a ripple effect. That's why people are getting pissed off with you and buying extra plastic, because it's working. And we need to change our behaviour, because behaviour change results in systems change. But that's just step one, isn't it? And really, we have to ask ourselves, what should be the priority here? Mitigation, which means trying to stop climate change, or adaptation, which means preparing for it. So we're on a plane. This is us on a plane, and it's crashing. It's definitely going down. And some of us are trying to jump into the cockpit and negotiate with the pilot. And some of us are just in the brace position. There's nothing we can do. And others are just eating peanuts and watching movies. And there's an argument for both of these things. We're going to fight to improve things forever, because every degree of warming that we manage to, stop is hundreds of thousands of lives saved. So it's not a case of, well, we're going to crash, that's it. It's a case of, how do we want that? How smooth can we make that crash landing? Because we can make it really smooth. There's still time. So I think really we should be doing both. I wonder what you think. I've got something in the chat now. Okay, but how do we believe there's an appetite to changes when people vote in the Tories? People like Boris, who venerate Churchill and the rest, and probably don't understand the true cost of colonisation, I know, and how it's related to climate change. People who continue to bring in law tax breaks for those rich for you to maintain the status quo. I don't know how to answer that. It's absolutely devastating. When the Tories got in on the 12th of December 2019, I drank so much wine on an empty stomach, and I cried all night at my husband's work party. It was really, really unfortunate, because I just couldn't stop crying. And with good reason, right? I mean, nothing good has come of that day. But they're not going to be in power forever. They simply won't be. They're making so many horrendous mistakes now. We have to imagine that this is the end. Your comment resonates. It's not will we do it or not, it's actually how bad will it be. The former used to be used by people to absolve themselves of responsibility. Exactly, Annie. And I think a lot of this, well, it's too late now. If we say that, that will be the ripple effect. And we can't afford to let that happen. Not one of those breaths in our body. Now, you already know about this list, all of you, I imagine. Forget recycling. Recycling's bollocks. Only 9% of plastic's ever recycled. Do recycling, do it, obviously. But the best thing is to, buy less. And that's privilege in itself. If you can trek around to the zero waste store or go to the special bakery that serves the bread in the paper, great. But if you've got a limited amount of time, your time is much better spent emailing MPs or joining in the campaigns we run at Parents for Future than it is washing out your peanut butter pot. It really is, because all of that compared to the amount of waste by supermarkets and huge corporations doesn't really compare. So your efforts really need to be, you're very busy women doing multiple jobs, and you need to be very, very cautious in how you expend your energy. Sure, we all know we must change our diets. We can do this, it will take a morning. We can talk about this, which you're already doing. We can write to our MPs. I feel like I'm preaching to the converted. You're all doing these things anyway. And you can come to marches and protests, but on the other hand, that's maybe not your thing, and that's fine. I once saw a sign on a protest going, "It's so bad the introverts are out." And that broke my heart. But you don't have to. I've got a friend who's a journalist, and she said, "I can't do what you do and you shout and sing and hold hands and throw muesli around." And I said, "Wouldn't want you to, love. That's not your thing. I don't even want you there. I want you behind your computer, please, and using your power as a journalist. That's far more useful than you coming with me on my muesli protests," as she calls them. You've all got children. The best children are all born in awe of nature. That's why it takes half an hour to post a letter, because they want to stop and look at every dandelion, and they want to point out every ladybird. And we lose that as we grow up, and that's why we're in this trouble. So never let your child lose that. Take them for walks, point things out, teach them the name of flowers. That's climate activism just as much as shouting on the street is, because you're raising a child to stay, not fall in love with, they're already in love with, to stay in love with nature. And Chloe's just made a really good point, Natasha, that it is a generational thing. I do firmly believe that Tory white man bollocks, home counties, old people, they're on their way out, and they're going to be replaced with your children. And with us, our generation have said, oh shit, and have started to put the brakes on. And I'm fundamentally against putting the responsibility of this onto the next generation's shoulders. They did nothing to cause this. It's not their job. But when I speak sometimes in secondary schools, and you should see their sweet faces. And I say, this is not your job. We're going to be working on this with you and for you primarily. But, you know, your generation is coming up and living in the world in a completely different way. There's a transformation going on that you get to be part of. And I try and paint a more sort of, it's not your job, but it's going to be exciting because you get to build what you want type vibe for those kids. Because how can you tell a 16-year-old, yeah, we buggered it, sorry, love? You can't. You have to do we have to do all the work we can so that they'll be able to carry it on in a way that feels natural to them rather than cleaning up our mess. Becky says, I made a conscious effort to say Mother Earth when talking about the planet, and saying she, and talking about her as my mother. Felt weird at first, but for my kids, it's now totally normal. See what you've done. And they understand the earth is alive and we're all part of her. I love that. Becky, you need to come and live with me and teach me your ways. I love that. I'm going to write it all down. And we can obviously vote, and we all know who we'll be not voting for next time. But I want you to remember, there are 100 companies who are responsible, I'm sure you know the statistic, for 71% of the emissions, okay? Assholes. They've all got addresses, and they're all white men. They actually really are. So anytime you're feeling really guilty, shake that off, right? I know it's tied up obviously with consumerism, but we didn't cause this. This has deliberately been designed to benefit the rich, and we're caught up in it. And now we're trying to fight our way out of it. And there's not much more we can do than that. So be kind to yourselves. That's really, really important. Kate says she works with adolescents. So heartening hearing about how engaged and motivated they are. I know, they're incredible. They're incredible. I mean, we didn't think about this when we were teenagers, did we? It didn't enter our heads. And Natasha wants to move to Mars. Okay. How are we going to talk about it? It sounds like some of you are actually really brilliant at this already. A few tips. Whenever the weather comes up, in fact, people are too frightened to talk about the weather in front of me now. Oh, don't mention the sunshine. She'll just go off on one. But I will, because, you know, it's bonkers, and it's a really good way to actually bring it up and also to connect it to people's values. I learned the hard way. People do not respond well to facts or being told what to do. Doesn't work. Tried it. Doesn't work. So asking someone about their feelings is brilliant, because then they have to really think, and they feel heard and listened to. And then tell them how you feel. Because if you say to someone, I feel really worried, they can't say, no, you don't. They have to accept, I feel worried, I feel frightened, is a lot more effective than, well, did you hear about the Arctic? And then we have to connect over people's values. So over here in the Netherlands, every single winter forever, the canals used to freeze every winter, and everyone would stop, finish work. The Dutch, any excuse to run out of work, out of the office and go surfing or go paddleboarding on the canals. But in the winter, they darted out of work, and they would, for centuries they've done this, ice skate along the canals, and all the children would ice skate around the canals after school. And it was this annual thing. And we haven't had a freeze for 10 years. And then this winter, it all froze, and everyone went berserk, because the canals had frozen again, and it was beautiful, and we all skated, and it was absolutely amazing. We're only going to live here for a few more months, so I'm really glad we had that experience. But I said to the older Dutch people, how do you feel about losing this tradition, you know, about how, well, we are very sad. We used to skate all the time when we were children. Yeah, and that's sad, isn't it? Because now you're losing that. how do you think it might look in 5 years' time? How do you think it might be in 10 years' time? And that's how the conversation takes off. And of course, they're then talking about something they will lose, a tradition they will lose. So find out what the person you're talking to values, and then ask them about how they will feel about that thing in the future. And that's how you get somewhere. Then we have to end on a positive. And we have to paint the vision of the future we want. And all human beings want the same thing. We want human connection. That's what we want. So you can say things like, I really dream about living in a place where all the neighbours are really good friends and we all share food. Because that's not a negative, that's a lovely thing. No one's going to, disagree with that. Or I like the idea of living somewhere where we all look after each other's children. I just think that sounds really nice. And then you're building an idea in other people's heads. And yeah, Natasha, try it, because we're all very tempted, and I do it too, to share facts, especially when there's so many of them. But it has to be feelings over facts, otherwise we're just not going to get through to people. And action, what does action look like to you? You're all taking different kinds of action. For me, I love the coming together with other people. I was very involved with Extinction Rebellion for a few years, and now I'm very involved with Parents for Future. Obviously, COVID has meant we haven't been able to come together as much, but now most of our work's online, and the connection with other people is my saviour, because every day I'm talking to people who get in, and people who are really energized and wanting to do things together, and we're holding hands and doing practical things. One really lovely success story at Parents of Future earlier this year, we worked on a campaign for Father's Day, and we targeted a chap called Bruce Carnegie Brown, who is a billionaire, lives in Putney with his 4 children and his wife Jane, and he works for Lloyd's of London, and they insure some of the most catastrophically damaging fossil fuel coal plants and oil fields and things like that. No one else will insure them because they're so awful. It's just embarrassing. But he, in exchange for billions of pounds, has agreed to insure them, and so they can go ahead. So what we did, and it broke my heart because it felt really small, but what we managed to do is get 30 mums outside his office, and they all held hands with babies strapped to their chests and pushed chairs, and they sang. And I was just, working on it from my computer, just crying, thinking, this is too small. We're just a group of mums, it's not going to work. It's just mums singing, and my heart was smashed to pieces. And it did work. And the office windows opened, and his secretary came out. And the following week, we got a meeting with him and found out that his 4 children are really angry with him. And he couldn't stay for the whole meeting, and most of the meeting was with his people, but we made a personal connection with that very powerful man by singing. So action works. It does. And it only works when we come together. There's nothing really we can do as individuals. It really doesn't work unless we hold hands and work together. And what are we motivated here by? I, for a long time, was very motivated by fear and anger, and that was fine because they're powerful and it really energized me. But I was not that much fun at parties. And now I'm still frightened and very angry, but I am much more motivated by love. I'm not so pissed off with everybody who still doesn't get it. I'm not so angry. I let those things wash off on me. They'll get there. I'm not wasting my energy on that, because there are people who are waking up, people like you, people who need my energy and time now over those people. They'll get there and they'll have a shock. And actually when they do come to the realization of how bad things are, they'll need a lot of support, and that's probably what our job will be then. But love is a much more powerful motivator than anything else, and the love we feel for our world, and the love that your children do and will continue to feel for the world, will make caring for the world effortless for them. It's not going to be a sacrifice for them. They're not going to know. They're not going to be thinking about what they wish they could have, because they're going to be brought up in such a different way. Imagine someone was terminally ill. At the moment, the world's in hospice. Mother Earth, she's in hospice. You'd never turn away, and give up. You'd put even more love and effort into that person as they died. You'd do anything for them. And at the moment, the earth is dying, and our love and our action needs to be tender and enormous. But the amazing news about Mother Earth, and to use Becky's pronoun, she is resilient. She's so capable of bouncing back. You leave nature alone for a week and it recovers. It's so powerful the way it does that. So there is enormous potential for nature to recover itself. And in the meantime, our love is the most powerful motivator. Don't worry if you're still in fear and anger. I am too. But when love takes over as your main motivation, you'll just fly with that. Now, some of these sessions, it's interesting. People will say, well, okay, I'm deciding then that I'm never going to buy any plastic toys for my children, just wooden ones. Or I'm never, going to get on I'm never going to get on a plane again. And all those things are absolutely fine and brilliant and good. Well, one woman said she was never going to buy any plastic toys. I said to her, that's super. But can I just ask you, what do you do for a living? And she said, well, I'm a lawyer. And I said, are you? And she said, yeah, I work for a big corporate monster. And actually, I'm really worried about going back to work after having my baby. And I said, you know what, Laura? It's interesting, isn't it? Because you're a lawyer. I know shit all about the law. Your brain has got incredible amounts of knowledge inside it. What about considering after maternity leave, you go back and be a lawyer for someone who's making the world a better place? And she sort of, it never occurred to her. And by the end of the session, she was all lit up. And she said, I could be a lawyer for Greenpeace. I said, yeah, anyone. There's actually 200 million organizations worldwide fighting this. 200 million organizations worldwide. That's a lot. So go to sleep with that figure in your chest. Don't believe the nonsense that we're individuals who have to fix this on our own. 200 million organizations, big and small, worldwide. And they all need lawyers, Laura. By the end of the session, she decided to quit her job and be a lawyer for a company that was going to massively make use of her massive lawyery brain. And I said, and isn't that a million times more powerful than not buying plastic toys? So actually, all of you have incredible skills, talents, professional qualifications. So after this session, you can think, what do I do? How do I spend my time? If you're a parent, you've already got the most important job in the world. Chloe's looking after her baby boy today. That was the most important thing you can do for the world today, Chloe, is blow raspberries on his tummy. But then we have other jobs, we wear other hats. Think about what it is, how your professional qualifications and your skills and talents can lend themselves to this, because it's amazing. I read a book the other day called, I can't remember what it was called. It's about crisis solving, and I contacted the author and I said, that's super to learn about how you solved that crisis back in 2018, which in the corporate world. I wonder if you've ever thought about the actual crisis that we all face, because you're really brainy. We could use you, and we're going out for a drink next week. So challenge people, empower them, because people think they don't know what to do, and they're already recycling, and they're already on their bike, and they're already vegan. So what else can they do? They probably haven't thought about what they already have inside of them. So that goes for all the people as well, especially those who are feeling helpless. I think we can all relate to this. David Brooks wrote, we've moved from big, interconnected and extended families, which help protect the most vulnerable people in society from the shocks of life, to smaller, detached nuclear families, which give the most privileged people in society room to maximize their talents and expand their options. The shift from bigger and internet-connected extended families to smaller and detached nuclear families ultimately led to a familial system that liberates the rich and ravages the working class and the poor. Every single new mum that I look after, I'm sure Chloe is the same, is crying alone in her own kitchen. And all the mummies are crying in their own separate kitchens in modern motherhood. And it's total nonsense. We're absolutely not designed to raise children on our own. It's just bonkers. When I had my babies, we lived on a street in London where, through necessity, we were just always in and out of each other's houses, and we became very, very close friends, and we literally raised our children together. It was like a commune, and it was the most beautiful 10 years because we were always together. Babies I'm obsessed with babies, but they're quite boring, aren't they? They don't say anything. We need other mums. We need to be raising our children together, as we did do, incidentally, since the beginning of time until about the 1900s, when everything got split up. Last year, I got a call from a social worker on Christmas, Boxing Day, and she said, "You're not going to believe this, but a Nigerian woman who was she was fleeing from Nigeria has just given birth on the aeroplane. So they've had to land, and now there's a baby, and the baby hasn't got any papers, so they're going to be put in a detention centre." And then she said, "Can you tell where I'm going with this?" So the next day they moved in with us, and we had this beautiful woman and her tiny 1-day-old son live with us for 4 months. It was one of the happiest times of my life. And you know what amazing experience that was, because it never occurred to her once to sort of say, "Oh, would you possibly mind holding the baby?" She'd just put the baby in my arms, or she'd tie him to my daughter's back, or she would hand him over to my husband when he came home from work, and then she'd start chopping onions and folding clothes. She didn't sort of say politely, "Oh, if you've got a minute." She just, the woman had never seen a supermarket. She thought the dishwasher was hysterical. She couldn't believe I needed a machine to wash my clothes. She thought I was pathetic. But we shared the baby. But there wasn't any discussion about it. It was just how, of course, she assumed we'd be doing it. And when his passport came through and it was time for them to move on, we were devastated. But she taught me so much about community and how children are supposed to be raised and why everyone's so sad and alone. Because we're not designed to be alone. We're an ocean that's been split up into buckets. Or we're snowflakes. And what would you do with a snowflake in your hand? On its own, it would melt, wouldn't it? But a million billion snowflakes together makes a snowfall. So we're obviously meant to be together, and we're not. Chloe just said, "I always think that when I walk down the street, how crazy to be feeling alone. I know, it's bonkers. We're not alone, but we're taught that we are. And the actual answer to all of this is to come back together. Individualism teaches us we need to be selfish to be safe and happy, but true security comes from a deeply trustful community that shares instead of hoards. How scary was the toilet paper situation? What was that about? Absolutely terrifying. And I understand that feeling as mothers. Oh my God, what if everything's scarce? We must look out for ourselves. But actually, it leaves you feeling so much worse. I planted a shitload of herbs outside my house with a big sign saying, "Help yourself." And everyone was very suspicious. Why has she done that? Just take a bay leaf. What? But now they're used to it. And they do. And then other people have left other things outside of their house. And that's how I think we just started, little things. And we know we pull together in a crisis. We are brilliant at that, especially British people. When something goes wrong, we come together. And all we need to do now is just make that part like an everyday occurrence. Don't just take food to the neighbour when she's ill. Just take it all the time. And she'll return the favour. And how can we build our communities? Well, I don't know where you all live, but these are things we can do everywhere. And they're fun. They're fun things. Like, saving the world doesn't have to be all boring and exhausting and dreary. I live in the Netherlands, so there is no litter because people pay their taxes and then, very interestingly, they use that money to sort of look after the people. So I know we've never heard of that, but the hospitals are amazing. There's no such thing as a private school here. Every school is amazing. Every school had child has access. All the roads are smooth, and there's literally no litter. So when I organise litter picks, the children are all fighting over the one crisp packet. But in the UK, there's loads, so you can organise a litter pick. Why am I moving back? I said that, Chloe. Everyone asked me, why am I moving back? And there's no way to explain it. They say, why would you move back to Brexit land? That is crazy. And I say, yes, it is. And on paper, I cannot begin to explain why, but it's just my home. I mean, it's a total shit show, and I need to be back part of it. We do beach cleans, we plant trees or fundraise, as we're doing tonight. This is a community, isn't it? If you're feeling brave, why don't you put yourself out there and say, does anyone fancy coming to mine and having a chat about the climate crisis, and facilitate discussion and ask people how they're feeling? And that's all you need to do, and make coffees. Climate emergency centres are popping up all around the country. There are 43 of them. So give that a Google. They are centres that are literally preparing them, that town practically, for climate events and extreme weather. So definitely look that up. Deliver meals to your neighbours for no reason at all. They're actually not very good at community here in the Netherlands, because everything works, right? The roads are fine, the hospitals are fine, nobody really needs to rely on each other. So they're actually very bad at community, interestingly. Whereas in the UK, where everything's shit, we need each other. So we're better at that, aren't we? I once took a meal to an elderly neighbour here, and she was very confused. Why did you bring this to me? I have a cooker. And I said, oh, yes, sorry about that. It's just you. I heard you're poorly. And she said, nobody has done that before. People don't really check on each other in the same way here. So one of the things we've got going for us is that we really do care for each other, because we really need to. Yeah, the land calling me back. Check on the elderly people, swap garden produce. I'm terrible at growing food. I try my best. And what I do grow, I grow so I can share it, just so I can, try and say, let's do this together. That's just the message I want to spread. If you look, you need, my neighbour said, oh, I need a hedge trimmer, I'm going to buy one. I said, don't do that. I haven't got one either, but let's ask around. There will be someone. Let's not go to Amazon and buy a new hedge trimmer. And then he came up with the idea, hang on, let's actually compile what we've got, and then we can all share all our stuff. I said, yeah, it's brilliant, Dave. Make people think it's their idea too. Community gardens, easy. And the best one, my favorite one, street parties, are really easy to organize, much easier than you think. You just need a big sign that says road closed. And then everyone loves it. And it's really brilliant in London, because people in London are brilliant at it. Right, this is true. We can all do something, but we can't do everything. And as women, I sometimes think that we can. We can't do everything. A lot of warming has already been locked in. It is a fact that life, as we know, is going to change really dramatically and very quickly. It's already happening, isn't it? Germany and the Netherlands and York was flooded. New York was flooded last week, and York was flooded the other day. And we will have to adapt in many ways to really crazy things. But it's not our responsibility to fix it all on our own. And we can't. We really are going to have to pull together with other people. And as things get worse, that's what will happen. People will pull together because they have to. Naomi Klein, one of my favorite writers, she's written lots of books about climate change. She says, don't try to do everything alone. Don't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. It is true, we have to do it all. We have to change everything. But you personally do not have to do everything. This is not all on you. It rests in the strength of the project of transformation that millions are already part of. And I love that last sentence, the project of transformation that millions are already part of. So I share that with teenagers. Someone who works with adolescents, someone can tell them that that quote, because it really helps, I think. Natasha says, at least COVID meant lots of people started WhatsApp to their streets. Yes, they did. They really did. And looking after people, they did. And Becky says, I live in a village and now the whole village is on WhatsApp. I love that. That's really special. And actually that's what COVID's done, hasn't it? One of those silver linings. Right, we often, there's a lot of, we run resilience workshops at Parents for Future, so do look us up because they're often free and they're quite regular. Resilience isn't ignoring the feelings that we're feeling. That's not what any of you are doing. It's feeling them and processing them and then recovering from them and carrying on. And they'll keep hitting you in the face. And then you keep feeling them again and then you process them and then you carry on as you recover. If we don't feel them, if we push them away, you're holding a balloon under the water. And what happens to a balloon you're holding underwater? It will pop up at some point. It just will. You can't not feel your feelings. That's what feelings are for feeling. So just feel them. And then they will travel through your body. Grief and love are sisters, woven together from the beginning. Their kinship reminds us that there is no love that does not contain loss, and no loss that is not a reminder of the love we carry for what we once held close. We are grieving because there is a lot that has been lost and a lot that will be lost. But we can't push that grief away. We have to do exactly what you're doing, which is feel it. Did you know that the IPCC report that came out on August the 9th was part 1? There'll be another part after Christmas, which will talk about the social reactions to this. So we're really, in the climate world, very excited to hear about that, because scientists can tell us a lot about what happens in the natural world, but the social scientists are going to predict how we'll react to that. But actually, really, no one knows what's going to happen. Anyone who tells you either good or bad what's going to happen is just someone clinging to a sense of control, which is understandable, but don't listen to them, okay? We all want to feel more in control, but we have to make friends with uncertainty. Sorry about that. We can't say these things. I've said this before, and you agree. We can't. They'll come true if we say that. And we've got children. How dare we? We can't say that. Often on the streets talking to people, what do you think about the future with Extinction Rebellion? They say, well, it's over, mate. It's done. Curtains in it. And I say, well, how can it be? You know, we can't say that. And just as someone said, COVID taught us that rapid change is possible. Someone's got their whole village on WhatsApp. You know, we still haven't got the right amount of money for the nurses, but we all really fully came together, didn't we, to make change happen. Now we're suddenly working at home, everybody. Dreadful things have happened, but really good things have happened and fast. So we've demonstrated that we can act quickly if we need to. We just need for more people to feel the sense of urgency. But ultimately, and I think this quote's very helpful to lots of people here about uncertainty. If uncertainty is unacceptable to you, it turns into fear. If it's perfectly acceptable, it turns into increased aliveness, alertness, and creativity. So what we've got to get good at is making friends with that uncertainty, because when we do, we start to shift from we're all doomed to anything's possible. My Mac is about to die, so I'm just going to plug in and carry you all across with me. I'm so light across the room and sit here with my dog. Okay. Let's get to this bit because I really want to hear from you more. What do we tell our kids then? As a parent, I approach the subject of climate change much like I approach the subject of sex. Whilst I answer all questions without hesitation and in full, I make sure not to answer more questions than I'm asked. I don't know how old your children are, but I would urge any conversations to be entirely age appropriate, and often that means not telling them very much at all. My 12-year-old obviously has a phone and he Googles things. And so that's heartbreaking because he knows a lot. But I also say the things to him that I say to you, and that is what keeps him going. And I think really that we owe that to our children. But if your children are very small, right up until the age really of 7 or 8, and this is based on lots of child psychologists and climate specialists, your job is to help them continue to enjoy nature, to stop them from falling out of love with it, really, to spend as much time as you can in nature. I've got a lovely story for you here about Corrie ten Boom. This house is just around the corner from where I live in the Netherlands. And this house used to belong to this man, Caspar ten Boom. And in the Second World War, he and his 4 children, this last one's called Corrie, and she was the one that came to fame. In this house, right at the back, in that bedroom, he built a fake wall, and over a period of 4 years in the Second World War, the family hid 800 Jews from the Nazis and saved their lives. So they become quite famous, and now this is a museum, and you can look inside and see where they hid the Jews. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because when Corrie was a little girl, she was on a train with her father, and she said, "Daddy, what's the word sin? What does it mean, sin?" And they were quite a religious family, which I presume is why she asked that. But he said, "Corrie, you see this suitcase? I wonder when we step down off the train, if you'd be able to carry the suitcase off the train." So she got out of her seat, she tried to pick up the suitcase, and it was really, really heavy. And she said, "I can't pick it up, Daddy, it's too heavy, I can't pick it up." And he said, and that's the same as knowledge, Corrie. Some knowledge is just too heavy for a little girl to bear. And so it's my job as your father to carry that knowledge for you, because I'm the grown-up and you're the child. So I'm going to carry the suitcase off the train, and I'm going to keep that knowledge about that big grown-up thing in my head, and you're not to worry about it. And I think a lot of that has to come into it, because our children have this one precious childhood, don't they? And it is not as if anyone has said, yes, we're absolutely doomed. And I know some people have, and some people have said we're all going to be fine, and anything in between. So when we're actually comfortable enough, and it will take a while, but when we're comfortable enough to live with that uncertainty, then we relieve our children of that. I took this photo of the trees last winter, and I just thought, gosh, they look just like lungs. And then I found this picture. And as I've said here, there's a strong sense that when humans are locked away, nature thrives. And it did thrive for a while. But that's not because humans are the virus, as people were saying, because actually, just like indigenous populations, human beings have lived in harmony with nature for centuries. Everything was fine. It's not the people that are the problem. The system's the problem. So when David Attenborough said humans are overrunning the world, I didn't like that phrase, because it made out that we were sort of, locusts or something like that. It's the system, it's capitalism. It's unfettered capitalism. It's not human beings. We're actually quite nice. We can behave abysmally, but if you've ever read anything by a Dutch author, actually Rutger Bregman, he wrote Humankind, and it's the most wonderful book about how cooperative and kind we are. We're filled with oxytocin. Otherwise, we would have murdered each other long ago. We're cooperative pack animals. It's the system created by a small few that's actually the problem here, not us. Look how connected we are to trees. We're supposed to be here. We're part of nature. We've just forgotten that. I'm aware of time. I just want to read you from Catherine Ingham, very, very wise old lady who's got a beautiful TED talk. And she says longevity was never a guarantee for anyone in history. We've all imagined that we'd live for 80, 90 years, and we imagine our children will be the same, but that was actually never promised to us. All we've ever had is now, present moment. We have to be in love with our life now. We're dishonoring other people who haven't had what we've had if we don't. She says, whatever time is left to us and however hard it might be, we are the lucky ones. We were able to be here despite the overwhelming odds of that not being the case. The number of times we could have died out and we didn't. Gratitude for life itself becomes the appropriate response, even on the bad days. Be of service. It will feel good. Being of service counters anxiety, and it gives meaning to your life, a sense that you're being well used like good compost in the field of life. Acceptance is not apathy. It's a powerful form of love that seeks us to see the truth of the situation and to carry on anyway, which is what you're all doing. Acceptance allows us to live fully in the time we have. Give up the fight with evolution. Evolution wins. We were right where we were headed all along. I found that very comforting. And you can look that up as a TED talk by Catherine Ingham. Becky, I worry about finding a happy medium when my son asks questions all the time. I want to be honest about why we do recycling and buy less, but I don't want to cause him any anxiety. I know you can do that, Becky. You can do that. You can just say, because we love Mother Earth, because she's so precious, and we're going to try really, really hard to just look after her. Just keep saying it and then change the subject, because actually it will become very normal for him. I mean, all schools are talking about this now. But I do empathise and know how you feel. So this is just really important for all of us. We have to watch what we consume. My phone loves, because it's all designed to catch my attention, saying, oh, look at this headline, look at this flood, look at this famine. It wants me to, it knows what I'm interested in, and it gives it to me all day long. So be very careful about how much you're putting inside your precious mind, and how much of your energy is being sucked out. Okay, be very selective. Allow yourself perhaps one article a day, or you know yourself best, however much you can cope with. Seek comfort and solace from other people. That's key. I'm going to tell you about a few groups that you're more than welcome to join. Listen to podcasts. There's so many. I've got a big list at the end. And then regularly allow yourself to switch off without feeling bad. Have a bath. Read a novel. I forgot about novels for years. I thought I just had to read climate change books. Novels are great. Read a love story. Read poems. Watch telly. Go laugh with your friends. You must do that, because otherwise, how are you going to have the energy to carry on? You must protect yourself. I say to all mothers, who's the most important person here? You or the baby? And they say, the baby. And I say, no, wrong answer. You are. Who wears the mask on the plane first? You do. You're no use to your baby if you don't look after yourself. And you're no use to anyone else in this, in this most enormous of tasks if you don't look after yourself. So really prioritize yourself so that you have actually got the energy to carry on, because this is a marathon, not a sprint. Becky says, I recently heard about using the phrase respect the earth rather than save the earth, because she will be fine eventually. Quite right. Humans and other species won't be fine. Respect the earth, absolutely, and tread lightly, those phrases. And we also shouldn't say climate change, because people say, well, climate's always been changing. We say climate breakdown. That's another quick tip. Language is important, but respect the earth, that's beautiful, because who can argue with that? Okay, I don't know if this is helpful or if you want to take a screenshot. It's quite bonkers to give a mother's long reading list. This is not your homework, okay? Just if this is helpful. I find podcasts are probably more helpful because you can pop that on while you're doing, all the jobs you're doing anyway. I should have added Humankind to this by Rutger Bregman because it's so lovely, but it's not specifically about the climate crisis. These are lovely to listen to, and these are on YouTube. They're painful in some ways. They will involve you facing your grief, but on the other hand, they're also very uplifting. And these podcasts have really helped me, especially Hot Take. This one's really good. Outrage and Optimism, and Facing It is brilliant. So look those up. These books here, I need more books from people of color, and I need to adapt the list, but they are really good and really sort of healing as well. I'm sure you've all got brilliant recommendations as well, so pop them in the shot. Oh, Chloe, you're brilliant. Thank you, love. She's taken a screenshot. Thank you. And if you have your own recommendations, please share, of course. That's me at the end. These are really good. They're my favourites. Although Chloe introduced me to someone else today, who I must add. Parents of Future. That's who I'm spending a lot of my energy on with now. Great group of people. You don't be frightened to join. We're not going to give you a load of jobs to do, but there is so many campaigns you can help us with. Our current one, we're working really hard for COP26 in Glasgow. There are 300 groups worldwide. So there's enormous group in the UK. We've got groups in Germany and France and Spain and America and Mexico and Nigeria and Australia and New Zealand, everywhere. So we have a global call on Wednesday evening, at 9 o'clock. So some people it's like 5 a.m. for them, and other people it's 11 o'clock at night, and they're all blinking at the screen, and it's really lovely. And then on Wednesday evenings we come together as the UK group. But if you can't make it, you can't make it. And it's very friendly, and we've got lots of different WhatsApps, and we need your skills, but we also want to offer you community and a place where you can come and talk about these things regularly. And I've made some great friends. I've got some really great friends that I've never even hugged because of Parents for Future. So do join. Just follow along until you're comfortable to sort of join in, or just take solace from the fact that we exist. I think that can be really helpful as well. I love these people. You probably follow quite a lot of them. Elizabeth, my lovely friend, today just published a beautiful book called Parenting in a Changing Climate. So I'm really proud of her. It's beautiful. She's in North Carolina, but it's such a good read, and available from today. Parenting in a, I think I put that on the list here. Yes, I did. Where is she? Parenting in a Changing Climate by Elizabeth. It just, every sentence you'll be going, I feel that too, Elizabeth. It's just nice to feel less alone. She's got loads of wisdom in those on her pages. And this is the end, because ultimately, I mean, you're yogis, you know, Chloe, right? You know that the present moment's all we've ever had. So I really want you to give yourself permission to feel great joy. Otherwise, what are we trying to save? So, or respect. I'm not going to say save anymore. Becky's got the language down. Please allow yourself to feel joy in every day, in little ordinary things, and notice it. What I'm finding is that actually I'm feeling more than ever before, because everything seems more precious now for some reason. So I'm very grateful for that. Listen, I've been whooshing on, and I would love you to open up. I'd love you to open up and talk about how you're feeling now, either in the chat or please unmute yourselves and join in. I'm amazed you stayed this long. You're absolutely gorgeous and amazing, and so needed. It's such a comfort for me to see, well, you know, to just know that there are so many people who are holding hands and joining together. Oh, look at that recommendation. Sophie says, oh, thank you so much. That looks great. Sophie, can you all see the chat? And Becky says, the Future is Beautiful podcast. That sounds amazing. At the same time, Carl Sagan said something beautiful. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself. Exactly. Humans have the privilege of consciousness to even contemplate how and why we're here. We shouldn't waste it. Exactly. So that's why we're allowed to. And life is an experience, isn't it? Good at all the feelings, all the experiences. I'm glad you feel better, Lizzie. I'm so glad, Kate. I'm really grateful for these recommendations. The future is beautiful. That's my dog walk tomorrow. Sorted. And Hilary Cottam, thank you. She's even put a link in. Wonderful.
Thank you.
So much more we can say there, but I would love to hear from you now. Chloe, how are you? How is your baby? Is he okay?
Yeah, he stayed asleep, but so that's
lovely.
Good news. That's good news. Yeah, but thank you so much, Antonia. You're amazing.
No,
you really are.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Great comfort to meet people like you. It really is. You know, when I first started doing this session, it was like me and one other person. So this is lovely.
I think we need to clone you. That's the only problem.
No, we have. Look at you all. we're all on the same mission.
No, yeah. It's great. It's so, I feel it's kind of yeah, it's so important to treat it with balance, isn't it? Because if we came away thinking everything's fine, great, really hopeful, then that's, you know, that's not true either. But equally, if we come away feeling, you know, despair and hopeless, and I think the guilt thing can really weigh you down. I used to spend a lot of time being like, oh, you know, packaging and you know, and I'm much more relaxed about it now. And I don't mean like we shouldn't do good stuff, but it's just like it's a waste of my energy to worry about little things. I should be looking, you know, after my family and myself so that we can go out and do, you know, bigger and better things. So it's just like where are we going to put our energy? And like you said, do we put our energy, you know, do we put our kind of frustration around the people who are not going to listen to us and not going to change, or do we kind of, like you said, find the low-hanging fruit and the people we can connect with and feel like that we can make a little changes here? So
totally
positive and inspiring. Thank you so much.
Annie says, I think finding others is key because she feels so alone. You're not alone in feeling alone. I felt so alone for so long. It's so gloomy because I'm a massive extrovert and I love being around people. So I hated being the doom and gloom one, but you're absolutely not alone. And I hope that you feel less alone after tonight. And I know if you know, join Parents for Future and other groups, that feeling will ease massively. I don't want any, you know, but on the other hand, you have to go through it to feel it. And the negative feelings have to be felt too. And that's how we process them. Sophie says, where am I going to put my energy? I feel so much more able to focus on this question. Yeah, Chloe just hit the nail on the head. She's right. We mustn't worry about the little thing. You've got a certain amount of energy and you're pulled in a million different directions. So how are you going to use that precious, precious energy that you have? Has anyone else got anything to share? I want to make sure I let you go and have a nice bath or something else. What Vanessa said. Yes.
Hi, Antonia. Thank you. That was really, really needed this week. Actually, I did spend the first few days this week feeling so overwhelmed with just the world and what's happening in it constantly. Yeah, I think something that I tell other people all the time, and I sort of, it's like one of those lessons that's in my head, but I haven't actually managed to do myself, is that idea of how we need to emulate nature with our patterns and our cycles, so that, you know, if you think of a wave, energy of a wave going forward, and it kind of builds and builds and builds, and then it recedes. And so when we're putting our energy into something, we can't always be pushing forward. Sometimes we have to be receiving and resting, which Chloe talks about so beautifully often in her posts. And I just haven't managed to crack that at all. Like, I know it in my mind that I need to do that, but finding the time, because when I do, like, you know, rest, or if I do take a day to be like, oh, I'm going to do less today, and then I feel bad that I'm, you know, then you feel like you have to catch up. So
Right.
it's just, you know, and I do think, you know, coronavirus, and generally I just think one of the biggest things we can all do is, imagine if we all slow down on the planet, imagine how much consumption would be slowed down if we all just slow down.
Yes.
But it's hard to balance that with the urgency of what's going on.
It is.
So that's my biggest struggle.
Yeah. And that's such an amazing point. And I've just remembered something I was supposed to say, which is that social justice, and this is social justice, is a choir. And we all think we have to sing all the time, but we can only sing the note for so long. And then we have to take a breath, which is exactly like your wave. So when we take our breath, what happens is everyone else sings, don't they? And the harmony carries on. No one can, the audience can't tell you, they can still hear the beautiful sound, but some people are taking a breath while others sing, and that's how it works. And rest is absolutely vital. So I'm really, really glad that you said that. Thank you. And I hope everyone else has taken that from Becky as well, that the receding and the quiet, we mustn't ever. Oh, Lizzie, my son said today, Mummy, I've been doing breathing all day, I need a rest. Breathing is intense. We need to be really, really kind to ourselves, and I really love that that wave idea. How's everyone else feeling? Are you all right? Just want to hug you. Yeah, and it is a choir, and we can't all sing all the time. Absolutely not. Yeah. Is everyone else okay? Are you going to be able to have a nice sleep now? Yeah? 3-year-olds are hilarious. Oh, so jealous that you have one. Delicious. Oh, 8-month-old. It's your most important job in the world, cuddling babies. I'm sure I will log off and think, oh, bugger, I meant to say this or ask that, because that always happens, doesn't it? But do stay in touch. You marvelled at dandelions. That's literally the best thing, probably the best thing you did today, Anna. You know, Chloe, this is me. So let's stay in touch. Probably Instagram's the best way. I will have to come sort out a newsletter at some point. But also, if any of you are pregnant, or is anyone pregnant, or you all had your babies, just Blossom. I was going to tell you about Blossom Antenatal, who we set up over the pandemic, and now we run free classes. Well, most of our classes are free. Breastfeeding is always free. But I also run sessions for single mums and motherless mothers as well. So let's stay in touch, because we have become a community tonight, and that's all thanks to Chloe George, who has pulled us all together, even though she's got a tiny baby. So I can't thank you enough, Chloe. It's been an absolute pleasure. Sophie says, have lots of smarter, clearer arguments with my friends without children who are worried about having them because of the climate breakdown. Yes, I feel so deeply for your poor friends. I feel that. Please send them my way if they're worried as well. It's understandable. Yeah, Chloe, you're a legend.
Oh, you guys, it's just such a balm to see your beautiful faces.
Natasha's going to see you and Lenny tomorrow. Well, Gel.
Yeah, baby sing and sign.
Lucky us. My God.
Another important thing.
Sweet. Too gorgeous. Okay, well, make sure that for the rest of the evening you do something very nurturing with yourself, okay? Because if you're okay, then everyone else around you will be too. Okay. Absolutely lovely to meet you. Stay in touch. Let's be friends. Chamomile tea, perfect. Okay, lots of love, darlings, and look after yourselves. Chloe, I can't thank you enough. Such a joy.
You too. Thank you. Thank you,
Let's stay in
Antonia. So
touch on the
grateful.
Instagrots. Yes.
And the Instagram, definitely. Thank you all. Take
And thank you
care.
all very much for
Good night.
donating to the trees. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
How many
150
trees?
quid.
130 quid. That's
150, yeah, brilliant.
300 trees.
Oh, wow.
300 trees just because we have
300 trees
chat.
from tonight. Oh, wow, that's so great.
See, it's really worth it, isn't it?
Amazing.
Lots of love, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.